Hello guys, this is Ankush and today I am delivering a presentation on T.S. Eliot and about criticism. Here I will present the famous modern critic and his theories about criticism. But before I start about it, let's discuss something about T.S. Eliot, as he was a modern English poet, playwright, literary and social critic. His life has many ups and downs. From the very beginning of his childhood, he was seventh and youngest child of his parents. He trained himself as a poet from the age of 14 itself. Then he issue a handwritten magazine, which was the Fireside. Later, he published a fable for Fister magazine during his school exercise, which became a famous magazine, which later published in the Smith Academy Record in February 1905. If we talk about his study, then he studied about philosophy at Harvard University, completed his MA in 1910. With addition to this, he also studied about French, Sanskrit, Pali, Indian philosophy, Indian classical literature like Bhagavad Gita, and preachings of Buddha from Buddhism. He also spent his World War I years in England. He married to Vivian Hagwood in June 1915, but later on, due to mental illness, his wife died and he married again to Valerie Fletcher in 1957. Valerie was an assistant to T.S. Eliot. Initially, T.S. Eliot worked as a schoolmaster in a school, but later on, he quit the job and joined a bank in the bank named Lloyd's Bank in London. Later on, he also quit this job and became director of Faber and Faber Publishing House, where he became a founder and editor of literary journal Criterion. So let's talk about criticism in literature. But the word criticism itself is a practice of judging the merits and faults of something. The word something here I mentioned is literature, that is English literature. But the criticism is not only just to find the fault. The criticism is to analyze the things, to study, evaluate, interpret the literature, and to understand what is the possible meaning of work of art, what a poet or a writer wants to say in his creative art. Through the criticism, we can understand the literary work in a very broad manner. Eliot and criticism are interlinked with each other. Eliot was a great personality because he was a great poet, a great modern critic. He declared himself as a classicist in literature, royalist in politics, and Anglo-Catholic in religion. And yes, he was. According to him, notions on religion, politics, and literature are different things. We cannot divide these things from each other. He has a lifelong commitment to criticism. His critical works was very important in English literature, and also it changed the path of English literature history. According to T.S. Eliot, the criticism should be an objective, and a critic should have the knowledge of history of literature, of past. He should interlink the present and past of literature and set the poets and poem in order. Let's talk about the Eliot's views over the critics and creative work of art. According to whom, creative work should be judged by the words but not by the voices. That is, one critic should not blame any other poet personally or take any revenge. He should explain the things by words only. And same should be produced in the mind, and he should explain the things according to the taste of readers. As the critics are also humans, and their views may be different, their methods may be different, but they have to explain and analyze the things according to the reader's mind, that they have to enlighten the mind of reader. And also they should compose the differences and avoid the blind following of any other critic. Their views should be different from other critic. They should not follow them and just imitate the words from their criticism. A critic should also have a solid reason that why this literary piece should be preserved for the future. Now let's talk about the functions. Actually, Eliot's views on the criticisms are the base for the function of criticism. His views are very similar to the functions that I have discussed earlier. According to him, that good criticism needs to be explained by works of art and correction of taste. It also takes a great effort to hard work to express the things by criticizing the work, and although it needs to be judged by judged to the words only and enlighten the mind of readers, compose the differences and preserve it for the future generation. The main thing, the tradition of art should be followed. A critic should have knowledge about the traditions, about the history, that the work belongs to which origin. And criticism and creative art should relate to each other. The highest kind of criticism is that which is done by writer himself. A writer himself criticizes his work as a creative work of art. Criticism is not only to criticize the words, present the demerits of the work, but also analyze deeply. The true purpose of a critic is to present what is the technical fault in the work. As I mentioned, the critic should be experienced, knowledgeable about the work of art, and he should have a sense of tradition. He should link the text, link the connection between the past and present, and to inform and educate other peoples and also poet or writer about his work, but not to judge him personally. So let's talk about the next slide. As we know, the Eliot in the modern era showed a great affection toward the metaphysical poets. He defends them all the time. But why he done this? Because according to him, metaphysical poets compelling heterogeneous ideas into unity by operation of poet's mind is universal in poetry. There are two different of ideas during the metaphysical era. There was a unification of sensibility. Unification of sensibility means the unification of feeling and thought. In the metaphysical points, we can observe that we can feel the things, we can think about the things what are going on in the metaphysical poetry. But that was lacking in the Elizabethan and Jacobean ages, because there is something making apart the feeling and thoughts from each others. Metaphysical poets fuses the dissimilar ideas into a single whole. They unite the things in the reader's mind. Let's talk about dissociation of sensibility. The dissociations of sensibility actually first used by T.S. Eliot himself in the essay The Metaphysical Poet. As I already mentioned, his affection about metaphysical poets. In the from his words, in the 17th century, a dissociation of sensibility set in, from which we never recovered. The result was a decline of poetic quality. So why this is dissociation of sensibility established? Actually, later 17th century, in the beginning of 18th and 19th century, there was lack of unification of sensibility. There is lack of thoughts. There was lack of feelings in their poetry. For example, 18th century poets are intellectuals, but they did that. That is only about the thinking. We can. They thought, but did not feel the things. During the Romantic ages, the poets felt the things, but did not think the things. In Victorian periods, they meditate poetically but cannot express it. And in 20th century, the modern poets are literally similar to the metaphysical poets, uses conceits, bounds to be difficult. Here I just explain the things in a broader way. You can go through this slide later, and actually, it is just a definition of dissociation sensibility. As I mentioned, dissociation is a term which is used between the thinking and feeling. As the two terms are dissociated from each others. Thinking and feeling are falling apart from each others. You can see in the peak in the early 17th century, during the metaphysical ages, thinkings and feelings are joined to each others. Readers can feel the things and feel the things, emotions, everything, while later poets did not unite their thoughts with their emotive experience. Therefore, express their thoughts separately from the feelings. As we know, thinking is a process which comes from our brain, and feeling comes from our heart. So the separation of these two leads to dissociation of sensibility. Here you can see in the peak that I have separated the heart and brain in the term of question mark. They are falling apart from each other. But if they both joined, then there is another theory which comes into picture, that is the unification of sensibility, which was there in 17th century during the metaphysical poetry. Eliot mentioned the influence of Milton and Dryden. He blamed the Dryden and Milton for causing this split because their work has caused a split of feeling and thoughts. The metaphysical poets during the 17th century, such as John Donne and Andrew Marvell, had a unification of sensibility. They unite the thoughts and feelings together. I think Eliot was a big fan of John Donne's poetry because he gave a prominent example of united sensibility and thoughts. As he writes, thoughts to Donne was an experience. It modified his sensibility. Actually, in his example, he mentioned that John Donne has compared two lovers separated by distance by two legs of compass. That is lines from Valediction of Forbidden Morning. Here, the two lovers are separated and compared like two legs of compass. So here the association of thoughts and feelings together in his poetry. Also in the poem Phlia, John Donne compared the Phlia to a marriage temple of the lovers because it has sucked blood from the lovers and the beloved's lady. If we go through the metaphysical poetry, we can feel the things, we can sense the emotions, we can feel everything in our mind. The reader can create the picture what is going on in the poetry. So there was a unification, but now after the 17th century it was lacking. Here in this picture you can see the heart and brain came together. That is the representing the metaphysical poets poetry because they fuse the emotions with intellect and resulted it as a West poetry. As I mentioned, poets until the 17th century, that is the early 17th century, they have their poetry was thought and felt. But later in Enlightenment, New Classical Ages poets like John Dryden and Alexander Pope, their poetry only thought. And later in Romantic Ages like Wordsworth and Coleridge, also their poetry is fulfilled with feelings only. And in Victorian ages, there are written again thinking with poets like Tennyson and Browning. Actually, Eliot wants to rejoin the things, thoughts and feeling in poetry of modern age. He also provide the example of this integration as the wasteland. T.S. Eliot integrate the thoughts and feelings together in his work of art, a masterpiece, we can say. The Wasteland, which is published in Modern Era by T.S. Eliot, a very long poem actually, but he reunites the things that was in the 17th century during the metaphysical poetry. His poem, The Wasteland, is an suitable example of unification of sensibility, the unification of thoughts and feeling. There is another theory of T.S. Eliot's which is known as traditional and individual talent. Actually, it is a literary essay, by the way. which is published in Literary Journal in 1919, Egoist, and later published in The Sacred Wood. This essay mainly divided into three parts. The first part contains the concept of tradition, second, theory of impersonal poetry, and third is conclusion. According to T.S. Eliot, there should be a traditional and individual talent in the poetry, in the literary piece of any poet or writer. Actually, tradition involves with the historical sense that compels the poet to write not only his own words, but there should be a link with the history. There should be a feeling that the whole of past literature of Europe, from Homer. Homer was a great poet during the 2nd century AD. I think he was, if I totally remember, he was a Greek poet actually, and very beginning in the English literature. So basically, T.S. Eliot wants to convey a message that every poet, every writer should write the things that has a link in the past, that is coming traditionally, and there should be a historical sense. But he should not write about his own generation, that is about his own thinking. Let's understand what is tradition and individual talent. Tradition means the understanding the context of previous piece of art, like Shakespeare's art, and a critic now should judge the poet on the basis of standards that was in the past. For example, what I have written nowadays, my masterpiece, whatever it should be judged on the basis what the others have written in the past. That is, if I write some poetry, one can judge my poetry on the basis of what Shakespeare did in the past. Whose poetry is better, Shakespeare's or mine? So judging the things depend on the standards. What was the standard in the past and what was the standard in the present? One more thing, Eliot also mentioned there should not be an turning loose of emotions, but an escape from emotion. My individual emotion should not reflect in the poetry or in literary work. Poet and poetry are two different things. A poet should not mention his own life in his poetry, and a critic should not judge the poet personally. So let's talk about sense of tradition. What is actually sense of tradition? Sense of tradition means does not invent anything new, but we have to follow the things from our past. But follow the things from past does not allow us to copy paste the things from Shakespeare's poetry. There should be a source of tradition, that is like from Homer, Shakespeare, Dante to the modern times. Poet should recreate and development what his predecessors have created. But tradition and individual talent has its own negative impact, like it distrusts novelty, originality, and avoid the new things to come in the picture. It also discourages the individual talents and their attempts. According to T.S. Eliot, the historical sense is that the poet should have a sense of history of poetry, but what the other poets have done in the past. Now, from the words of T.S. Eliot, the most valuable parts of the poet's work are those in which the dead poet, his ancestors, asserts their immortality most vigorously. Here I have reflected a picture in the middle where the past and present are interlinked with the pole. So we have to interlink both past literary work and present literary work. There is a dynamic relationship between these writers, and in the criticism, the same thing is to be judged on the basis of standards. Here one more term comes in the tradition, that is individual talent. Individual talent we can reflect as impersonality. There was a theory of Wordsworth, that is poetry is a spontaneous overflow of power feelings. because the literary piece that comes from a poet is a spontaneous overflow of our feelings. But Eliot opposed the theory of Wordsworth, and he gave another theory of impersonality. According to him, the progress of an artist is a continual self-sacrifice and self-extinction of personality. He gave an example of oxygen and sulfur dioxide's reaction. If we put a platinum with the oxygen and sulfur dioxide, platinum works as a catalyst here. When platinum is introduced to gas chamber containing oxygen and sulfur dioxide, they combine to each other and produce sulfuric acid. But platinum remains unchanged because it is only a catalyst and does not affect the process. It only helps to complete the process. So, like this, oxygen and sulfur dioxide are feelings and emotions, and platinum is the mind of poet. And new compound, the sulfuric acid, is the poem. So, T.S. Eliot mentioned the whole process as a chemical reaction. According to Eliot, the poetry is not turning loose of emotion, but it is an escape from emotion. It is not an expression of personality, but escape from the personality. Emotion of art is impersonal. There is nothing to do with personality to the poet's life. As I mentioned, the theory of Wordsworth was poetry is the spontaneous overflow of our feelings and recollected in tranquility. But according to T.S. Eliot opposed the Wordsworth theory and said, poetry is not turning loose of emotion, but escape from emotions and escape from personality. The poet should be objective and impersonal. So we can conclude that a good poetry, according to Eliot, it is to be a reference to the historic masterpieces, historic work like Homer, Shakespeare, Dante, and also it should be impersonal. Impersonal, that is nothing to do with his personal life, his personal emotions, but escape from emotions and personality. So the next theory, that is the objective correlative of T.S. Eliot. It was actually objective correlated was the term that is used Eliot in his essay Hamlet and its Problems. According to T.S. Eliot, Hamlet was a great artistic failure because Hamlet is dominated by emotions which was inexpressible, and therefore it was a failure. According to the Eliot, the way we express the emotions in the form of art is to be by objective correlative. We have objective correlative should be a set of objects, situations, chain of events. For example, if when we watch the horror movie, there are some objective correlative set of objects that replicate the horror things, like cracking of doors, sound of thunder, owls screeching, dogs barking. When these things occurs in the movie, then we know that is some ghost is coming to us, not really coming to us, but in the movie. But in opposite to that, when we see a romantic situation, like when we watch a romantic movie, there are roses, there are poetry, there are songs, there are romantic music, there are two lovers, there is like emotions of love, red color, heart, spring, roses. So these all the objects evoke a particular emotion. Then what is particular emotion here? That is love. But in horror movie, cracking of door, thunder, wind blowing in unusual manner, and in the picture I have mentioned, the doll from Conjuring actually. So this type of things creates a particular emotion, that is horror. So according to T.S. Eliot, everything, every situation should be expressed in the form of art. That form of art will be a set of objects or situation. That I have created a situation of horror situation, blank black wood, wooden jungle, means different things, different situation for different purposes. But in Hamlet, according to T.S. Eliot, Hamlet was a failure because Shakespeare does not express the emotions in the way of objective correlative. He was unable to express the Hamlet state of mind. Hamlet was full of emotions, but it was the lack of expressing the emotions in the Hamlet. So he uses the objective correlative term in the Hamlet and his problems, and also mention the variety of problems that was found in the Hamlet by the T.S. Eliot. So basically, objective correlative is nothing, only expressing the emotions with the help of objects, with the help of situations, with the help of events. So lastly, the conclusion. But so we can conclude that the Eliot's tenets are very invaluable in the English literature. But we have found that is he opposed the Wordsworth theory, and also emphasized the importance of tradition, examine the correlation between tradition and individual talent, emphasize on the traditional historical references to the poets like Shakespeare, Dante, Homer, etc. But we can conclude that all his theories are very similar, objectively and scientifically to the Aristotle's theory. I'm not expressing that theory here. And in short, actually, we were thankful to T.S. Eliot for his views on criticism, because he was a great poet, he was a great modern critic. We will be greatly indebted to the T.S. Eliot. Thanks.